Hi, I'm Asher. I came home early for Thanksgiving after closing a $900 billion deal overseas. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted it to be a surprise. But what I found on that porch wasn't just betrayal, it was theater. My parents, bruised and shaking, helped each other stand. Inside, my wife and her parents laughed over wine, living in my house like I never existed. And the worst part? They knew I was coming back. They just didn't care. But I cared enough to uncover everything. And what I found ended families. The plane landed just as the sun dipped behind the clouds, a soft orange haze spilling across the horizon. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home early. For once, I wanted it to be a real surprise. 10 years of airports, hotel rooms, and video calls had dulled my sense of belonging. But tonight felt different. I had finally done it. The biggest deal of my life. $900 billion. A project that would change everything. I thought the least I could do was bring a little light back into the house I'd built for my family. The drive from Dulles to our home in suburban Virginia took about an hour. The highway was quiet except for the soft murmur of a Thanksgiving radio show. People on air talked about gratitude, about coming home. I smiled, thinking of my parents, how my mom used to burn the turkey every year but somehow made it taste better the next day. I could already picture her face when she saw me walk in early. As the road narrowed into familiar streets lined with maple trees, I slowed down. The leaves had turned gold and red, scattered across the pavement like confetti from a forgotten parade. When I turned into our driveway, I saw the house glowing warmly. Lights on in every window, laughter echoing faintly through the walls. My chest lifted. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound. But then I saw them. Two silhouettes sitting on the porch steps, huddled close together. My parents. At first, I thought maybe they'd come out to greet me. I smiled, waved a little, but they didn't wave back. My father's hand was on my mother's shoulder, steadying her as she leaned forward. The porch light flickered, catching the pale bruise circling her wrist. I froze. For a second, I didn't breathe. I stepped closer. "Mom?" She startled slightly but didn't look up. My father's voice was barely a whisper. "Let's just wait out here until they're done." They, not we. The word hit me like a punch. Inside, laughter swelled, the kind that comes after a toast. I could hear glasses clinking, a woman's voice, Vivian's, bright, confident. To family, to new beginnings. New beginnings. My name wasn't among the laughter. I walked to the door, half expecting it to swing open and for someone to shout, "He's home!" Instead, silence met my knock. I tried again, harder. Still nothing. Through the thin curtain, I could see people moving. Vivian's parents. Her brother, faces I barely recognized. The living room had been rearranged. Our wedding photo was gone, replaced by a framed picture of her parents cutting a ribbon in front of what used to be my company's old logo. Something tightened in my chest. I opened my phone and checked my inbox. Vivian had sent me a calendar invite weeks ago for Thanksgiving dinner. But when I scrolled down, my parents' names weren't there. Neither was mine. The event read, "Thanksgiving at the Crowell Residence, hosted by Vivian and family." Vivian and family. My parents, the real Crowells, were sitting outside their own house like uninvited guests. I turned back toward them. My mother tried to smile, the kind of smile that hides shame, not joy. "You shouldn't be here yet, Asher," she said softly. "It's not—" She stopped. I looked over her shoulder through the window. Vivian stood by the table, her hand resting lightly on her father's. They were laughing. My chair at the head of the table was empty, but the place had been set. Polished silverware, folded napkin, a glass of wine already poured. I felt something cold run down my spine. The wind picked up, blowing leaves across the porch. The light above us flickered again. My father squeezed my mother's arm as if to keep her from saying more. I stepped closer, voice low. "Whose house are we in, Mom?" She looked at me, eyes red. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. She just shook her head. The silence between us stretched. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but none felt right. Instead, I took a deep breath, reached for her hand. It was cold, and helped her stand. My father nodded, avoiding my gaze. We walked down the steps together, the crunch of gravel under our shoes the only sound. The car sat at the curb where I'd parked. Behind us, laughter burst again from inside, louder this time. I could almost make out Vivian's voice. "It's about time this house felt like ours." The word ours burned into me. I opened the car door for my parents. My mother hesitated, glancing back once toward the glowing windows. For a moment, I thought she might collapse. I held her steady until she found her footing. The air smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey. It should have felt like home. It didn't. When I got into the driver's seat, I couldn't turn the key right away. My hands stayed on the steering wheel, the dashboard lights casting a dim glow over my father's tired face. I wanted to ask what happened, but I already knew the answer. The kind you can't fix with words. As I reversed down the driveway, I looked once more at the house, the porch light flickering, the front door still open just enough for the laughter to spill out. "They didn't even see me," I whispered. My father reached over, placed his hand on mine. "Maybe that's the point, son." I didn't answer. The wind carried a faint echo of Vivian's toast, the word family bouncing around the empty street as I drove away. The road ahead was dark, but in the rearview mirror, that house, my house, kept shrinking until it was just a speck of light swallowed by the night. The door had closed behind us, but I wasn't done listening. Through the glass, I heard them laugh again, as if we had never existed. I didn't turn the key in the ignition. I just sat there, hands loose on the wheel, staring at the front door. Then, slowly, I stepped back out of the car. My parents stayed seated. My mother kept her eyes on her lap. My father looked off toward the neighbor's lawn. Neither stopped me. They knew where I was going. My shoes crunched over the same leaves I used to rake every fall. The door was still open, not wide, just enough for music to leak out, and with it, the thick smell of roasted turkey and something too sweet, like store-bought pie filling. Inside, it felt warm, manufactured. The floor was polished differently now. Darker stain, no more welcome mat with our last name stitched in navy thread. I stepped carefully. It was my house, but my footsteps sounded like trespassing. The entryway had been redecorated. I noticed it in details. The mirror with the driftwood frame Vivian always said clashed with the walls. Gone. The little bowl where Dad used to toss his keys. Gone. And where our family photo used to hang, above the fireplace. Gone. In its place, a massive, glossy portrait of Vivian and her parents, dressed in coordinated fall colors, arms around each other like they were cast in a Thanksgiving commercial. The canvas was centered, professionally lit, perfectly staged. I stood there too long. Vivian's voice floated in from the dining room. "Asher, you made it early." She walked into view, holding a folded linen napkin, eyebrows lifted in calm surprise. Her tone had the smoothness of a realtor mid-sale. "Didn't expect you until tomorrow morning," she said. Then, noticing my eyes on the portrait, she added lightly, "Oh, we're updating the wall, trying to keep everything cohesive." Cohesive. My mother had framed that original photo. It was the last one before her hands started trembling. We took it under the oak tree in the backyard, the one my father planted when I was born. I didn't answer. Behind me, I heard the front door close. My parents must have followed. I turned slightly. Mom stood just inside, hands clasped, the sleeve of her sweater slipping again. The bruise on her wrist looked darker under the recessed lighting. She noticed me looking and pulled the fabric up quickly. Vivian caught the glance too. She said nothing, just smiled, tight-lipped, and turned back toward the kitchen. "Let's get everyone seated," she called over her shoulder. Dinner had already been plated. I noticed our silverware, the set my parents gifted us for our 5th anniversary, now laid out in symmetrical, impersonal perfection. Vivian directed the staff, her voice rising above the soft jazz playing in the background. "Let's make sure Mrs. Baines and I handle plating." Handle plating. I watched as a younger woman, someone from the catering company, gently touched my mother's elbow. "If you wouldn't. Mind, ma'am. We've got it from here." My mother stepped back. It was her kitchen, hers. She taught me how to peel potatoes at that counter. She used to hum while baking, sometimes dancing a little when she thought no one was watching. Now she was being moved aside like someone lingering too long at a hotel breakfast bar. The turkey looked perfect. The air smelled festive. But everything felt wrong. We sat. Or rather, we were sat. Vivian's father, Harold, took the seat at the head of the table, my seat. Eleanor, her mother, beamed at the food like she'd cooked it herself. Vivian clinked her glass. "To family," she said, "to people who know how to make a home truly shine." Applause. Laughter. My father's hands were folded. His eyes found mine, damp but steady. A silent message passed between us. "Don't say anything. Not yet." A knock at the door. One of the catering staff answered it. A neighbor from down the block, Susan, the one who always brought her tired-looking beagle to our lawn, held a pie. Vivian swept to the door with that effortless grace she wore like jewelry. "Oh, thank you, Susan. Come meet everyone." She began introductions. Her parents, her brother, her cousin, even the caterers got names. But not my parents. "They're just helping with dinner," she said casually, as if explaining the movers. "Just helping." My throat clenched. I built this house for them, brick by brick, every corner, every window, and now they were guests without names. I clenched my jaw, holding the heat down. I knew if I spoke now, it had come out all wrong. After dessert, I stood, excused myself, said I needed a call. No one looked up. I walked down the hallway, past the kitchen, past the guest bathroom where my mother once painted yellow sunflowers on the tiles, because she said the room needed joy. There was a space on the wall, an empty nail where our photo had hung for over a decade. I stood there staring at the absence, not out of anger, not even sadness. Something colder, sharper. Resolve. They erased us tonight, but I remember every frame. Before I slept that night, I opened a box I shouldn't have kept. It sat in the corner of my old office, the one room Vivian never cared to enter. The air still smelled faintly of cedar from the shelves I'd built years ago. Outside, the wind rattled against the shutters and soft flakes of snow had begun to fall. The kind of quiet that makes your own breath sound too loud filled the room. The cardboard box was plain, marked only with a black Sharpie. Personal records. I didn't remember labeling it, but the handwriting was mine. I slid it onto the desk, brushed off a layer of dust, and lifted the lid. Inside lay a decade of my life, property deeds, business receipts, and yellowed letters from my parents congratulating me on buying this house. I ran my fingers over the papers, feeling their edges like tracing the grooves of old memories. Every nail, every wall, every inch of that place carried my name. I just didn't realize how quietly someone had been erasing it. At first, it was comforting. The proof that once this home had been mine in both name and spirit. Then, deeper in the pile, I saw something that didn't fit. A folded receipt from our joint bank, dated 2 years ago. The heading read, "Temporary Title Transfer." My heart tightened. I remembered that day. Vivian had come into my office wearing that calm smile she used when she wanted something big. "It's just a formality, Ash," she'd said. "A tax adjustment for the firm. You'll sign it back later. Trust me, it'll protect us." And I had. Now at the bottom of that document, a line was added in fine print. One I hadn't noticed before. Title fully reassigned. Property merged under Baines Holdings, LLC. Baines, her parents. I set the paper down slowly. The sound of it hitting the desk seemed louder than it should have been. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The house, my house, wasn't legally mine anymore. It hadn't been for years. They didn't steal it overnight. They'd been building the theft brick by brick, behind polite smiles and holiday dinners. Outside, the snow thickened, painting the windows in white. My reflection in the glass looked calm, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of stillness that comes before a storm breaks. I reached back into the box. Old invoices, contractor agreements, a copy of the building permit, all signed by me. All useless now. Then I saw something odd. A thin folder with tape along the edge. It felt newer, smoother than the others. I peeled the tape off carefully. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, written in Vivian's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Her looping cursive, the kind that used to make me smile when she left notes in my suitcase before business trips. This one wasn't that kind of note. "If anything goes wrong," it read, "the assets are secure with my parents. He'll never contest me. He doesn't like conflict." I stared at it for a long time. The ink had bled a little, probably from humidity, but every word was clear. It wasn't guilt. It was a strategy. She'd written that line years ago. A woman preparing for a war I never saw coming. And in that sentence, I saw myself. The quiet man who thought calm meant strength. The man who avoided fights, thinking peace could hold things together. The man who signed papers he didn't read carefully enough, trusting love would never weaponize his trust. "She built her power on my silence," I whispered. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Each second scraped at my chest. I folded the note back, placed it inside the box, and closed the lid gently. Not like evidence, but like an ending. The kind you give to something you no longer mourn. If they built this house out of lies, I would take the truth apart brick by brick. The hallway outside the office was dim. My parents were asleep in the guest room, a space barely big enough for 2 people and a nightstand. I walked quietly, pausing at the doorway. My mother's hand rested on my father's arm, the bruise faintly visible even in the low light. Her breathing was soft, uneven. For a moment, I thought about waking her, about telling her everything I'd just discovered. But what good would it do tonight? I reached for the switch by the porch door. The light flickered once, weakly, then died. I pressed it again. Nothing. That same porch light that had shone on her tears hours ago, gone out completely now. Maybe it was fitting. I stood there for a while, watching the snow gather on the window ledge. My reflection looked older somehow, colder. Tomorrow, I said quietly to the empty house, I start remembering out loud. The heater clicked on, humming low through the vents. Somewhere down the hall, a floorboard creaked, like the house itself shifting under the weight of its new owners. I turned off the office lamp, left the box on the desk, and walked toward the guest room. The snow outside fell harder, swallowing the streetlights one by one. By the time I lay down, I already knew sleep wouldn't come. By the time the sun broke through the thin gray sheet of clouds, I'd already driven 3 blocks with one thing in mind: coffee and fresh bagels for my parents. Nothing fancy. Just warmth. The city felt muted that morning. Frost clung to the edges of windows like it had been painted on. Thanksgiving had ended, but something heavier had begun. I pulled up slowly. Same driveway I'd backed into for over a decade. Same garden beds, though the mulch looked newly turned. I stepped out, steam curling from the coffee lids in my hand. When I reached the front door, I reached into my coat pocket for my key. Slid it in. It stopped halfway. I frowned, tried again. No give. I tried the side door, then the garage. All locked. Deadbolted. Changed. I knocked, not hard, not angry, just confused. From inside, I heard footsteps. Not hers. Not anyone I recognized. Softer. Quicker. Then the door opened. Barely a crack. A woman I'd never seen before peered out. Uniform neat, posture stiff. "Can I help you?" she asked, all politeness, but none of the warmth. I blinked. "I live here." She looked me up and down, then offered a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't think so, sir. I was told this residence is private now." Before I could answer, another voice drifted down from the stairwell. "Asher?" Vivienne, standing there like a magazine spread. Perfect hair, silk robe, mug in hand. "You're up early. I thought you'd flown back to Singapore." Her words were syrupy sweet, but the edge was unmistakable. "I didn't." She nodded slightly, stepping down a few stairs. "Well, we assumed. You're always in motion." Then came the real reveal. She gestured lightly to the new woman. "This is Marlene. She's part of the new household team. We made a few changes, streamlined things. You know how clutter creeps up." I looked past her into the hallway. The paintings were different. Even the smell of the place had changed. No lemon polish, no faint sandalwood from my father's old slippers. Just lavender and bleach. "I see," I said. "Where's Paul?" "Our gardener?" Her brows lifted. "He retired, said it was time. We let him go with a nice bonus. It's better this way. Fresh start." I didn't answer. Fresh for who? I left without another word. By mid-morning, I was helping Dad adjust the heater in their small rental apartment when the knock came. 2 officers, neatly dressed, calm. "Mr. Crowell?" I stepped forward. "We received a call this morning. A report of possible elder coercion, a removal without consent." The younger of the two glanced at my father, who had just stood from the armchair. "Everything okay here, sir?" My dad hesitated. His hand trembled just slightly as he tucked it into his pocket. "We're fine," he said, voice quiet. "My son brought us here. We're with him." They looked at each other, then nodded, made some notes, thanked us, and left. But that moment, my father's hesitation, it cut me deeper than I expected. After they were gone, he sat back down slowly and murmured, "Son, They're not going to stop. I nodded. Then we don't either. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. I opened my laptop. By early afternoon, I was seated across from Richard Kellman, our family's longtime lawyer. He looked older now, grayer, thinner, but sharp as ever. His office smelled like paper and peppermint, the radiator clicking in the corner. He reviewed the documents slowly, glasses sliding down his nose. When he looked up, his face was unreadable. They built a tight title chain. No obvious fraud. You signed the transfer. I know. There's no evidence of force, just bad faith. So what do we do? Kellman leaned back. You're fighting people who care about optics, not ethics. This'll be a narrative war. Then we control the narrative. He smiled faintly. You always were quiet, Asher, but not passive. That evening, I drove home, not to the house, but to the place my parents now slept. A small rental, 2 bedrooms, creaky floors. Mom had already fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket tucked around her. In her hand, half open, she clutched a linen napkin from last night's dinner, embroidered on the corner. Just one word, home. I sat beside her, careful not to wake her. The locks were changed, the staff replaced, the story rewritten. But beneath the surface, beneath their foundation, the truth remained. And I wasn't done yet. By the next evening, the city had settled into that half-silence that comes between dinner and sleep. Cars hummed faintly below the apartment window. My parents were watching a late-night rerun, the sound low. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, cursor blinking on a blank email. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was precision. Subject, before you lose more than property. Body, I know what your daughter did. I have proof. Let's talk privately before this becomes public. I read it twice. No threats, no drama. Just truth, packaged clean. Then I hit send. The message wasn't for Viviane. It was for her father, Harold Baines, the man who'd coached her in charm and deceit since she was old enough to talk business at the dinner table. I knew men like him. They didn't respond to warnings. They reacted to fear. I leaned back, watching the message disappear into the digital void, and exhaled slowly. The city lights flickered against the window, red and gold reflections pulsing like a heartbeat. The next morning, I was back at Kellman's office. He greeted me with his usual dry calm, coffee in hand, sleeves rolled up. You look like a man who's about to do something irreversible, he said. Not irreversible, I replied. Just overdue. He smiled faintly and unlocked a drawer, handing me a small external hard drive wrapped in a brown envelope. I've had this in archive since you sold your first company. Corporate backups, pre-merger. You might want to check the Harbor Trust folder. Back at the apartment, I connected it to my laptop. The folders were dated, organized, typical of how I worked. Contracts, scanned agreements, tax filings. Then, buried near the bottom, a folder labeled Harbor Trust. Inside were voice memos, audio files. I clicked the first one. Static, then a voice. Viviane's. Clear, measured, businesslike. Nothing like the soft tone she used at home. We move his assets before he notices, she said. By the time he does, it'll look voluntary. He signs everything. He trusts too easily. There was a faint laugh in the background, Harold's. He's smart, but not ruthless. He added, That's your leverage. I froze, played it again. Every word was a nail sealing the truth I already knew. I hadn't been betrayed by accident. It was engineered. I copied the files, encrypted them on a separate drive, and handed the backup to Kellman later that afternoon. If they built this empire on paperwork, I said. I'll bury them in documentation. He looked at me for a long time before saying quietly, "Then, son, dig deep." That evening, in a dim restaurant across town, Harold Baines was dining with a state consultant, a deal maker, the kind who traded favors over steak and quiet laughter. Halfway through dinner, his phone buzzed. He glanced down. My name on the screen. He ignored it at first, slicing through his meal, trying to keep the conversation smooth. But then another alert appeared. A cloud link. Proof of fraud. Baines Holdings. His fork stopped midair. "Everything all right, Harold?" the consultant asked. "Family nonsense," Harold said quickly, but his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass. Later that night, he called Viviane. "You told me he wouldn't fight," he said, voice low but sharp. "He won't," she replied. "He doesn't have the nerve." "Then explain this." A pause. He forwarded the email. When Viviane opened it, the silence on her end was different. Not confusion, not anger. Fear. For the first time, her certainty cracked. I didn't need to see her to know it. I sat at my desk that night, lights off, city glowing outside. I watched my reflection in the window. Not the man she'd dismissed, but someone else. Someone awake. "I don't need to shout," I whispered to the empty room. "I just need the truth to echo loud enough." I began to write a timeline. Every transfer, every false report, every manipulative act hidden behind civility. Each line was a step toward reclaiming what had been taken. When the list was done, I felt lighter. Not because the fight was over, but because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was directing. Before heading to bed, I checked on my parents. Mom was sitting at the small dining table, wrapping her hands around a mug of chamomile tea. "You look calmer tonight," she said softly. "I'm not calm," I answered. "I'm focused." She smiled, half tired, half proud. "Your father always said patience can be louder than rage." Then maybe it's time they heard me. I walked to the small balcony. The cold air bit my skin. Across the street, a porch light flickered. Like the one at the house. Maybe coincidence. Maybe reminder. I went back inside, found an old box of tools under the sink, and changed the bulb over our door myself. The light came on steady and warm. A small victory. But it meant something. Because light, once restored, doesn't forget where it's been dark. By dawn, Viviane had already made her move. One that could destroy everything if I wasn't ready. Her move didn't come from fear. It came from arrogance. And arrogance was always her weakness. I found out mid-morning, scrolling through the business news while sipping bitter coffee. Every major outlet carried the same image. Viviane standing in front of the Baines Holdings building, poised, smiling, the wind catching her hair just right. She spoke to the cameras as if she were delivering charity, not deceit. "My husband, Asher Crowell, is currently receiving treatment overseas," she said, voice smooth as silk. "He's been under great stress, and I've been managing our family's affairs in his absence. It's been challenging, but we're holding strong." She even paused for a breath, a calculated moment of compassion. The crowd of reporters nodded sympathetically. Cameras flashed. One journalist shouted, "Will Mr. Crowell return to leadership once he's recovered?" Viviane smiled. "In time, yes, but right now, our priority is his health and privacy." The headlines came faster than the coffee cooled. Corporate visionary steps up as husband battles depression. Wife of tech executive takes charge amid family crisis. Every lie wrapped in just enough truth to sound believable. By noon, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Messages from former partners, investors, even college friends. Some offered sympathy. Others wanted statements. A few didn't bother to hide their curiosity. I put the phone down and stared at the screen for a long time. They hadn't just stolen my property. They'd rewritten my existence. Kelman called minutes later. His voice was tight, angry. Asher, you've seen the press? I have. We can issue a public statement, counter it immediately. No. He went silent for a second. No? Let them talk, I said. Every lie leaves a footprint, and she just left plenty. He exhaled. You're planning something. I'm preparing something. For the rest of the afternoon, I went through the press clips, timestamps, quotes, video angles. Every broadcast was another breadcrumb. She'd said too much, too smoothly, enough to trap herself later. That evening, as I was sorting files, there was a knock on the apartment door. My mother opened it before I could get up. Then she froze. Viviane stood there, flawless as ever, holding a leather folder under her arm. The hallway light glowed behind her, outlining her like a ghost that hadn't realized she died yet. May I come in? She asked, eyes already scanning the room. I nodded once. For what? She set the folder on the table and sat, crossing her legs neatly. You're making this harder than it needs to be. So are you. She didn't flinch. I came to make peace, but peace requires closure. She slid the folder toward me. Sign these. It's time we both moved on. I opened the folder. Divorce papers. Predated. My signature already printed in perfect imitation. I looked at her. You forged me now too? She smiled, that infuriating, empty smile she used when she thought she was winning. It's not forgery if it reflects reality, Asher. You've been gone for months. The public thinks you're abroad. Let's keep it simple. Her calm was mechanical, rehearsed, and then I caught it. In the reflection of the window behind her, the faint outline of her parents' car parked outside, headlights off. Even your cruelty, I said quietly, comes with an audience. Her eyes flickered for the first time that night, just for a second. Then she stood, gathering the folder. You've changed, Asher, but not enough. When she left, the silence she left behind was thick, heavier than anger, heavier than fear. I walked into the small bathroom, the one with the cracked mirror above the sink. The light buzzed softly overhead. For a long moment, I just stared. The fracture in the mirror caught my reflection twice, split me down the middle, the man I was, and the one I had to become. You let them turn you into a ghost, I whispered to my own reflection. Not anymore. Without thinking, I slammed my fist against the glass. The cracks spread like lightning. Blood streaked down my wrist, thin and bright. My mother's voice echoed from the hallway. Asher, what did you do? I turned toward her, hand trembling slightly but voice steady. It's all right, Mom. I just needed to see what's underneath. She hurried to grab a towel, wrapping my hand, eyes full of fear. You don't have to fight them like this. I met her gaze. I already am. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table again, the same place where this all began. My hand throbbed gently beneath the bandage. The glow from my laptop lit the room pale blue. I opened a new email, this time not to Harold. To The Ledger, Investigative Desk, subject. Check the property deeds, Baines Holdings. Body. You're missing a story. Start with the tax filings dated May 12th, 2021. Follow the signatures. I hovered for a second, finger above the key. Then I clicked send. Outside, the night was silent. The world didn't know it yet, but a new war had just begun. one that wouldn't be fought in courtrooms or boardrooms, but in the quiet space between truth and exposure. Because by morning, the truth would have teeth, and it would bite exactly where it hurt most. The first headline hit before sunrise. By 8 o'clock, every financial network was running it. Bain's Holdings under federal review. Allegations of property fraud emerge. The words ran like wildfire through every boardroom in Richmond. Investors panicked. Shareholders demanded statements. And for the first time in years, the Bain's name trembled. I sat at my parents' kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, laptop open. The morning news anchor spoke in that professional calm meant to soften chaos. Sources allege the existence of recordings linking executive family members to falsified transfers within Harbor Trust. Federal auditors have begun preliminary review. My mother peeked from the hallway, robe tied loosely. "You did this?" I didn't answer. She didn't need me to. Across town, Vivian woke to pounding on the gate. Reporters crowded her driveway, cameras flashing through the fog. Her father, Harold, stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, face red with disbelief. "Who leaked this?" he barked. Vivian, pale and shaking slightly, muttered, "They said it's anonymous." Harold slammed his phone onto the counter. "Anonymous. My foot. It's Asher. Who else?" Her hands trembled as she poured coffee, trying to appear composed. "You said he wouldn't fight back." "I said he didn't look like he would," Harold snapped. "You should have finished the job before he found his footing." I watched their chaos unfold from my living room. The television showed live coverage. Cars crowding outside Bain's headquarters, employees avoiding cameras. The journalist had done exactly what I'd hoped. Not all the files, just enough. Enough to create doubt, enough to make every denial sound rehearsed. I turned the volume down and said quietly, "You can take someone's name, but not their truth." Kelman called minutes later. "This is it, Asher. The timing's perfect. We file the civil suit now before they spin it back." "Not yet," I said. "They're still pretending to stand. Let's see how far they'll fall first." He sighed, but didn't argue. He knew me well enough now. I wasn't looking for headlines. I was looking for exposure, the kind they couldn't clean up with a press release. By evening, Richmond glittered under cold December lights. The Jefferson Hotel was hosting a charity gala, one Vivian and her father couldn't skip without admitting defeat. The cameras were there too. Every smile looked tighter than usual, every handshake cautious. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. The world was watching for me. Halfway through dinner, as waiters cleared the plates and the orchestra shifted to something slow, a projector at the back of the ballroom flickered on. At first, people thought it was part of the presentation. Then came the sound. Vivian's voice. "He won't fight. He never does. That's why we'll win." The room froze. The recording was clean, the audio clear. Gasps spread like ripples through the crowd. Harold's face drained of color. Vivian's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. Reporters scrambled. Donors whispered. Cameras rose like a swarm of vultures. At the back of the ballroom, a hotel staffer unplugged the projector, but it was too late. The damage had already settled in. Silent. Irreversible. Back in my apartment, I watched it unfold on a live stream. The chat exploded with speculation. I didn't smile. I just breathed out, slow and steady. "I told you," I murmured. "Let the truth echo." 2 hours later, a car screeched to a stop outside my building, then banging on my door. When I opened it, Vivian stood there, rain in her hair, eyes wild. "You ruined me," she shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I didn't move. "No, Vivian. You ruined yourself the day you called the police on my parents." Tears streaked her makeup, but it wasn't remorse. It was fear. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" she snapped. "People will forget. They always forget." I stepped closer, voice low but steady. "Maybe, but not before they remember who you really are." Her breath hitched. "You don't have it in you to finish this." "Maybe not the way you think," I said. "But I don't need to destroy you, Vivian. I just need to stop pretending you exist." For the first time, she said nothing, just turned and left. When the door clicked shut behind her, the apartment felt heavier, not darker, just quieter. I walked out onto the balcony, the city glistening under soft rain. Somewhere, a siren wailed faintly. Life moved on, but slower tonight. I pulled my phone from my pocket and called Kelman. He picked up on the second ring. "It's time?" "It's time," I said. "Prepare the filings. Tomorrow, we go to court." "Understood." Before hanging up, I looked down at the napkin my mother had embroidered, the same one I'd kept folded beside my computer. One word stitched into the corner: home. I traced the threads with my thumb and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "It's not revenge," I whispered. "It's restoration." The rain fell harder then, soft but relentless, washing away everything that wasn't true. But just when I thought the storm was over, one final secret crawled out of the shadows, one she'd hidden even from her father. It came in the simplest form. A thin, off-white envelope slid under Kelman's office door before dawn. No return address, no markings beyond my name, written in cursive I hadn't seen in weeks. The paper was slightly damp, from rain maybe, or fingers that hesitated too long. Kelman handed it to me as I walked in, still shrugging off the cold. "Found it this morning. No one saw who left it. I didn't need to open it to know who had. Inside, a single USB drive wrapped in tissue and a small note folded in two. The writing was unmistakable. For your eyes only, before you judge me, know why." "Vivian," I waited until I was back in Kelman's private office. Door locked, blinds drawn. Inserted the drive into his old, disconnected laptop. One video, dated 3 weeks ago. Titled only, "If You Ever Want the Truth." The screen lit up with her face. She sat at her vanity, makeup smudged, eyes red-rimmed. No jewelry. Just her. The version of Vivian I hadn't seen since the beginning. She didn't start right away. Just stared at the camera, breathing shallow. Then finally, "I didn't plan to hurt you, Asher. Not at first." She blinked, swallowed, looked away. "But every time I tried to build something, your silence, it crushed me. You never said no. You never fought. So I learned to take instead of ask." There was no anger in her voice, just exhaustion. The house wasn't for me. It was for them, to make them see I mattered, that I could control something, anything. I thought if I built enough, controlled enough, maybe I'd finally feel safe. She paused, face turning slightly to the mirror, but all I did was destroy the only person who saw me before the performance. She looked back to the camera. The last thing she said, almost too soft to hear: "I didn't want your forgiveness. I wanted your weakness. That's where I got lost." The screen went black. I stared at it for a while, not in shock, not even in sadness. "She wanted power," I said aloud, to no one, "because she never had peace." The snow had started falling light when I drove out to the old house. It stood hollow now. Lights off, curtains stripped, furniture cleared. I parked in the driveway, got out, and let the cold wind bite through my coat. The gravel crunched under my shoes like memory. Inside, I wandered room by room, not really searching, just remembering. "This used to smell like my mother's cinnamon tea," I murmured. "Now it smells like contracts." The study was untouched, though stripped. On the desk, one manila folder remained, labeled in her writing, "Divorce Settlement Draft." Inside, a check, made out to me. Signed. Amount, $1. Folded behind it, a note in thick black ink. "To buy back your silence one last time." I let out a single breath. It might have been a laugh, or disbelief, or both. Then I folded the check in half, placed it back in the envelope, and left it there. "I'm done being for sale," I whispered. Before leaving, I sat at the mantel in the one where our family photos used to rest, and wrote one final letter on hotel stationery I had in my coat pocket. "Viviane, I've watched what greed does to love. I've watched lies rot the bones of good families. But I've also learned this. Forgiveness isn't surrender. It's refusal to carry your poison any longer. You don't owe me peace. I already found it." I placed it on the stone mantel, beside the house key, the same one that once didn't fit the new lock. As I locked the front door behind me, my key working again only because no one cared anymore, I didn't look back. Late that afternoon, I picked my parents up and drove down to the James River. We didn't speak much. My father stared out the window. My mother hummed softly under her breath. We reached the bench where my father used to take me fishing, the same one where he once told me, "We don't choose how people leave us, only how we stay." We sat down, side by side. The sun dipped just behind the trees, casting long shadows across the water. "It's over," Dad said. "No," I answered, a quiet smile creeping in. "It's just quiet again." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the old cloth napkin, the one my mother embroidered all those years ago, the one that followed us through every apartment, every loss, home, one word, simple thread, still strong. I held it between my fingers, then let it go, watched as the river caught it gently, pulled it forward, and carried it away into the orange glow of dusk. Some things weren't meant to be saved, only released. That echo followed me into every new sunrise, a reminder that freedom isn't forgetting. It's remembering without fear. 6 months had passed. Seasons had shifted. Richmond felt like another life now, one I watched from a distance rather than lived in. I settled in Charlottesville, just outside the city, by the water. The new house was smaller, plain from the outside, but inside it breathed. Quiet wood floors, windows that let in honest light, and the smell of earth from a garden I now kept with my own hands. People think peace comes when noise stops. But real peace starts when the noise no longer owns you. Most mornings began the same. I'd step outside barefoot, mug in hand, steam rising in the crisp air. Birds flitted through the hedges. The soil in the garden stayed dark and forgiving. I tended tomatoes, herbs, lavender, small grounding work that asked for presence but never control. The newspaper sat folded on the porch, its headline peeking from beneath a gardening trowel someone, likely my mother, had left there. Baines Holdings declares bankruptcy amid federal charges. I didn't need the details. I knew how it ended. Every lie leaves a trail, and Viviane's trail had gone straight into courtrooms she used to toast in. I folded the paper shut without reading further and set it aside, under a stone. Later that morning, I had breakfast with my father. He lived a few blocks away now with my mother. They'd downsized too, taken up painting classes and daily walks. He'd aged, but in a graceful way, not worn down, just slower, more deliberate. Over eggs and toast, he asked, not directly, but softly, "Do you ever think of her?" I poured more coffee, then nodded. Sometimes, not with anger anymore, just understanding. He looked down at his plate, nodded once. "You didn't win by destroying them, son. You won by staying human." That stayed with me the rest of the day. Not because it praised me. It didn't. It reminded me what not to become. By early afternoon, I found myself wandering the house. No real reason. Just following the light that streamed through the windows like a quiet invitation. The hallway was lined with small frames. My parents on their wedding day. My younger self fishing with Dad. A candid shot of Mom mid-laugh, holding a pie she swore she didn't burn. I reached my study. A modest space, just a desk, a chair, shelves with more handwritten letters than books. In one drawer, I kept a small wooden box. Inside was the bent key from the old house, still scratched, still stubborn. I held it for a moment, then placed it into a drawer marked "Past" and closed it gently. In the late afternoon, the mailbox held something unusual. A letter, postmarked from a women's correctional facility. No return name, just a familiar, slanted script on the envelope. Inside, one line, written on plain paper. "I finally understand what peace costs." That was all. No apology. No plea. Just that. I read it twice, then folded it neatly. Walked inside, opened the drawer where I still kept the embroidered napkin that said "Home." I placed the letter beneath it and closed the drawer slowly. Maybe that was enough. An hour before dusk, I drove out to the James River. Same bench, same place. The sun was low and golden again. My hands rested loosely on my knees, my back straight, my breath steady. This time, no ghosts followed. The water moved with the same rhythm it always had. Unconcerned with our dramas, our rises and falls. I stared at it and let myself settle. We don't always get closure from others. Sometimes, we just stop needing it. The wind picked up slightly, brushing past my ears like an old friend with nothing left to prove. I closed my eyes. There was no ache, no weight, just wind, and water, and quiet. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It healed.